Turn it over to Mr. Lewis, if it's okay with you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lewis to have the final line of questioning before I thank our witnesses for their time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks to all the witnesses, of course, for your testimony. I'm going to, there's a couple of things, Dr. Breen, that you had mentioned that really caught my attention. You talked about urban adjacent. Can you tell me the difference between urban adjacent and what I'm thinking now, rural adjacent? And to set that question up, in fairness to yourself, my riding of Essex is next to Windsor, which is obviously next to the busiest international bridge in North America. And so the majority of, a lot of my riding would be incredibly rural. We have about 5 municipalities with around 25,000 folks each in them. And there's only one bus, to my understanding, the best of my understanding, between the Leamington-Kingsville area that goes up to the city. And so I'd just be curious, can you explain the difference between urban and adjacent, rural and adjacent, and then I'm going to jump into the cross-border side of things.
Certainly. It's a fuzzy definition, as most things in academia are, but an urban adjacent community would be a rural location where you would be able to commute to work every day. So for example, my brother lives in an urban adjacent rural community and commutes to Mississauga every day. That's possible for him. I live in the middle of nowhere. It's not possible for me. That would be typical, distance-wise, could be, anywhere up to 100 plus kilometers. Obviously, that being fuzzy, we know that there are areas in Southern Ontario that aren't strictly urban adjacent, even though their proximity might indicate otherwise. So it's a combination of distance from urban with the travel patterns of the people who live there.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Breen. And it is a little bit fuzzy, but I do appreciate the answer for sure. So, as I mentioned, a very unique riding. So I can literally go from from rural to urban to large city to now what I would like to jump into is the challenges of cross-border. So not only intercity, I suppose intercity, but intercountry intercity. And so there's a lot of folks that commute from Windsor over to Detroit and vice versa, and using our bus lines. Can you expand a bit on what would make life simpler for these folks with regard to how our countries work together? And I'm not just talking about nexus, so to speak, or passports. I'm trying to look at it at a larger scale with regard to the bus lines. Is there something specific there that we should be looking at / working on?
I would defer the opportunity to answer to one of my colleagues. I strictly focus on rural Canada and don't do cross-border, so I don't think I'm the best person to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Petronik. Would you be able to answer that question?
Yes, thank you. It's an excellent question. And Windsor is really at the nexus in the forefront of what international public mobility and public transit should look like. There's a great case study in Windsor Transit. If you get on the Windsor Transit bus, you can hop over the border in a matter of minutes. They have got such a good system set up with Detroit on the other side in terms of public transit. Clearly, there were municipal and federal dialogues that allowed for that. It's clean, it's safe, it's efficient. Get on the previous Greyhound bus, as I used to get into Detroit for auto conferences, and you get stuck for 5 hours on the border. There is not the same kind of interconnectivity, same border, same crossing point, nearly a few meters apart effectively, and one gets stuck for hours and the other has an integrated service. And it is very clear in Canada that the place to start building the best practices is the Windsor Transit pattern of behavior. It is extremely efficient. I have not seen anywhere else in Canada that mobility across the border is that cheap, that fast, and that seamless for anybody on a bus. So that's a case study to build from. As I said, to repeat, it did take federal intervention to make that happen and went well beyond the capacity and jurisdiction of the city and the province to enable that.
Thank you. Sure that I passed that message on to the mayor of Windsor as well. So kudos to him and his council and all levels of government. And so, and I know what you're talking about with regard to that bus. But usually once a year I get to go over and watch my beloved Detroit Lions play, and I usually take the bus. And I always go over with a big smile, but I don't usually have a big smile when I come back. So thank you very much for that, and I appreciate answering